It's not in the face! Thank you.
Hello and welcome to Hey, Not the Face with your host, John Nash, and your producer, me, Steffi Haynes. And today we are going to take a look at some brand new things. We're going to take a look at, first, new updates and filings to the UFC antitrust cases. We're going to talk about something called the Ali Act Preservation Alliance. We're going to talk about a new alliance that's been forged between TNT Sports and DAZN Boxing. We're going to talk about Saudi Arabia and cards that are going on there that are being canceled from there, postponed, what have you. We're going to talk about most valuable promotions getting serious about going into the MMA business. But before we get into all of those things, we need you to pick up a paid subscription so that you have access to everything that will be behind the paywall, because old timers know that we put about half of our show behind a paywall. You do get half of it free, but only half of it. So, John, how the heck are you?
Good. Pressure change as we have the new weather system coming in. So it's my age. I don't know. We've talked about this before. It really F's with me, but I am besides, the world falling apart, I'm doing fine.
I think it's so funny that when we start a show or you start an interview, you start by saying F's. But by the end of the show, you are using full-on fucks. And it always makes me laugh because you should just, start and end the same way. Just use the full-on fuck, because in these times, I bet even the Pope uses the F word.
Well, I saved the full-on F word for after the paywall. That's the bonus material. You don't get the full-on uncensored Nash on the free section. It's the unpaid section. You get the fully uncensored Nash.
I bet I could go back and find some full-on fucks from the stuff that's not paywalled.
I'm sure there might be an occasional slip, but I try to preserve it. I try to save it for the behind the paywall. So, I'm trying to give the people that are paying deserve a little extra, and they get the full uncensored.
Okay. So, if you've been here a while, you know how we start our shows. So, without any further ado, are there any new updates or filings to the UFC antitrust cases?
Well, there haven't been recently, but we haven't done a show, me and you, for a week now.
Right.
I mentioned this on the interview I did with Luke Thomas, so I'll bring it up for this show. The most recent filing, all were dated, I think, around April 2nd. They were filed in the UFC antitrust cases. There's 3 of them. So, again, we have a bunch of new listeners. There are 3 cases seeking class action right now. Johnson v. Zuffa, Serkinov v. Zuffa, and Davis v. Zuffa, but we group them all together as the UFC antitrust cases. And these filings center around a nasty, sub-dispute, because it's not part of the main case, between the plaintiffs, which are the fighters, and Dominance MMA, the fighter management agency run by our friend Ali Abdelaziz. And so here's the what's going on, I guess. The plaintiffs subpoenaed Dominance MMA back in January of last year to get documents related to its management of UFC fighters. So 14 months later, Dominance still has not produced, according to this filing, a single document. The court held a contempt hearing back in March and ordered production by April 3rd, 2026. So the main filing that we have was the plaintiff's motion for attorney's fees. The plaintiffs, again, the fighters, they're asking for $270,000. I should rephrase it, $270,755. Let's not ignore that $755. And they want to have Dominance pay, which would be $268,815 in fees, and $1,940 in expenses. And notably, the judge already signaled at the March 3 hearing that he intended to award fees. The fee breakdown is 286 hours of work, including, and this, I really should have became an attorney based on this. Partner Joseph Saveri is billing $1,500 an hour, with associates and counsel billing $825 an hour. God, I should have become an attorney. And the plaintiffs emphasize they're actually asking for less than everything may have occurred. They've excluded fees from earlier stages of the fight. Just this is the most recent block that they're asking for. They also included as exhibits a letter chain. So there's a number of exhibits, each a letter between dominance and the plaintiffs that tell a story of the increasingly, heated back and forth. The first one's dated from March 12th. It's from the fighters to dominance, the plaintiffs to dominance. And following this, I guess, would be right after the contempt hearing. The plaintiffs demanded device disclosure for all three of the custodians. And the named custodians were Ali Abdelaziz, Fardah Khalim, and Terrell Hunzinger Jr. And they reiterated that all collected dominant documents, I should say, had to be produced by April 3rd. And these would be under, I believe these were for privileged review only. So it wasn't like you had to hand everything over. That it was going to be reviewed for what was necessary for the case. So then March 13th, dominance sent a letter back, pushing back, saying two of the three custodians no longer work there. I guess everybody but Abdelaziz no longer works there, and use personal devices, so they can't get access to them. Dominance also said they can't meet that April 3rd deadline because their attorneys, that's Dominance attorneys, had a jury trial starting in April, and that reviewing the 100,000 plus documents would require a 10 attorney team costing over $100,000, which they asked or demanded, I should say, the plaintiffs fund in advance before any review could begin. So then the plaintiffs filed a letter back calling Dominance response non-responsive and accused it of backtracking on what it told the court. They argued the cost shifting only applies to expenses occurred from compliance, not from avoiding it. And then Dominance claim for reimbursement was premature since they hadn't produced anything. So then Dominance fired another letter back to the plaintiffs, arguing that the court had previously ordered plaintiffs to cover all costs around $10,000, claiming that almost $40,000 had already been spent and that they were owed. And said that the plaintiffs wouldn't fund a contract review team. Dominance own attorney would do a review at a rate, I believe, around $1,000 an hour, billed weekly. So then the plaintiffs fired another letter back to Dominance. They called this attempt to monetize remarkable, and then they accused Dominance of turning its non-compliance into a form of means to profit. And so they offered a $10,000 good faith payment, but they threatened also additional sanctions if Dominance did not comply with the April 3rd deadline. Dominance then said it is complying just on a rolling basis rather than a complete production, and then disputed the plaintiff's interpretation of the court's order. It maintained that a review is required, and then stated that it would not complete production by April 3rd, but would begin production by that date. Now, remember, April 3rd was when the judge said they wanted everything delivered by. And so as of the April 2nd filing date, Dominance has produced 0 documents despite 3 court orders, multiple contempt proceedings, and a year of litigation. And so the parties are deadlocked over 2 core disputes, whether a review should be privileged only or also include a responsiveness, and 2, who's going to pay for it. So this will probably be some discussion of this come April 21st at the next status hearing. So I will have to have someone there. I can't make it personally, but we have a listener that's probably going to be there, hopefully, and I know someone else will probably be there. So we should have someone on hand to give us an update what's going on at that April 21st status conference.
All right. Now, some other news broke just today as we are recording on Thursday, April 9th at around 9:22 p.m. Central. Something called the Ali Act Preservation Alliance was tweeted out by Nico Ali Walsh, who is Muhammad Ali's grandson. What is the Ali Act Preservation Alliance?
Well, what it is, my best understanding, they haven't come out publicly, but Ollie Walsh did mention there's 30 members of it, 30 key members of an organization. In fact, in the press release, they mentioned that. It's 30 key members and organizations in the community, professional boxing, and prize fighting have come together to form the Ollie Act Preservation Alliance. Now, I know Nico Ollie Walsh is in it. I know some of the sanctioned organizations, specifically the WBC, is involved with it. I believe the MMAFA is involved. I know that there's other individuals. I am not certain exactly if I do believe, I think like Golden Boy might be involved. Roy Jones Jr. There's people that are stakeholders in the current business of boxing. Pat English are getting together, trying to make a concerted effort to resist the Ali Act, the bill, the full name Muhammad Ali American Boxing Revival Act, as it goes to the Senate. And so this is their press release. I believe they chose, I'm guessing here, but I'm pretty sure they chose Nico Ollie Walsh because he's Muhammad Ali's grandson. Because if you notice for Endeavor's bill, TKO's bill, that the front person on that is the widow of Muhammad Ali. And so I think they're trying to counter that by putting him on the front. I'm sure they're going to introduce some other fighters and stuff but they want to get their biggest names up front, pushing for this. So that's the group that's been assembled to try to counter the Ali Act and try to lobby against it when it moves into the Senate. Now we'll have to see if they're successful, but there is at least an organized effort this time compared to what happened in the House.
Is it too late for something like this? And this is an in your opinion question, but is it too late for something like this to actually impact TKO's efforts to push that Revival Act through?
I don't think it's too late. Now, it would have been better to start this earlier, obviously. It would have been better to put up some resistance in the House, to even delay it, to force more hearings, the rally members of the House on your side. So it would have been better to do it earlier, but it's, I guess, better late than never. Now, they still have a chance because it hasn't been introduced in the Senate. Potentially now they can get some attention. They can work together to gather attention, to reach senators, to get allies on their side, to put up some sort of resistance. They released a press release, I think, which kind of outlines their strategy of how they're going to attack the bill in the Senate, what they're going to do. It talks about how the Ali Act contains provisions that are critically important to protection of boxing interests. So it goes through the protections that are taken away by the new bill, which I should just name really quick, are the prohibitions on coercive contracts, the required financial disclosure, prevention of conflicts of interest, and the mandatory disclosure by championship ranking sanction organizations. So it outlines those four. And then it talks about how the existing Ali Act is an anti-monopoly bill. So it does a good job just in this brief little description explaining how it was intended to prevent monopolization. And then it cites the example of MMA, because the UFC, the parent company of the UFC, is a major sponsor, how MMA has been basically monopolized. And then it also points out the proposed bill is an anti-labor bill. So it kind of goes after, I should say the third thing they do is they talk about if the proposed bill is enacted, a UBO becomes an entity that is exempt from all those other protections. And so a lot of this seems targeted towards Democrats, targeted towards what are supposed to be the traditional areas of interest, labor, going up some monopoly, which is kind of a new interest for a lot of people in the Senate. They also directly cite the Kung Lee et al. V. Zuffa, Judge Boulware's class certification from that case. And I'm just going to quote this really quickly. So Judge Boulware stated from his class certification, due to this anti-competitive coercive conduct, fighters were trapped by Zuffa's exclusionary contracts and their restrictive terms, creating a situation in which Zuffa had unfettered power and opportunity to suppress fighters' compensation. In conclusion, the court finds the plaintiffs have established that defendants' tactics were anti-competitive. Defendants evinced a clear intent to acquire and maintain monopoly power. I think that's important because what they're doing is they're pointing out that a judge actually had findings. Now, this is not the same as a trial. It's a class cert, but in the class cert certification order, his findings was that the UFC had clear intent to acquire and maintain monopoly power. So they bring that up as well. So you can kind of see what their messaging here is much stronger than what the individual people did earlier. The individual sanctioning organizations and Oscar De La Hoya and everybody else protesting what TKO was trying to do with the bill. This is a much sharper messaging, I think. And so we will see if it's effective, but it's got to have a much better chance than what happened the first time when it looked like the boxing stakeholders were basically dependent on MMA fighters calling into the athletic commissions to stop the bill on their behalf.
All right. We will keep you guys updated on how this thing transpires along the way. Now let's talk about TNT Sports and DAZN Boxing because they have forged an alliance. That news came out today as well. What details do we have on it?
Well, this is pretty interesting and came out of left field. I had not heard about this at all, any rumors. So maybe everybody else had. I hadn't. But it does something we've discussed on the show is that it gets, hopefully, that's the big part, the hopefully part, but it'll get to an American audience. It'll allow for an American audience to see high-level boxing. Because right now, the biggest problem in the United States is they are on DAZN. DAZN has basically gathered all the top promoters in the world that operate in North America or, do fights around the world, but are broadcast in North America on their platform, but no one in America watches it. The subscription numbers, my understanding, have dropped tremendously since the peak when just after they got Canelo, they got up to like 1 million subscribers very quickly. And since then, they're less than half that. Now, I don't know what the current numbers are, but they're probably not great. They charge a lot. And so you have to question what is how effective is it to have a platform that has to charge a lot but can't make much revenue because very few people are going to subscribe and less people are aware of it. And so this is smart in some ways to put this on a platform that can reach a wider audience, much more acceptable. Now, I don't know which fights they're going to have on yet. I doubt that they're going to have the biggest fights just because of the revenue model. The way they're discussing it is they're going to split the advertising. Otherwise, they will give this programming, this fight, as they call it, fights, going to do one every month. They want championship events, going to put it on TNT or some sort of, I think it's TNT, who knows what the name change, what might be under the Warner Brothers label. You're going to air once a month, and then they're going to split the advertising revenue. Now, if it does very good numbers, the advertising might be strong, they might make money, but I still don't think that's enough money to generate the type of revenue that will pay for the very biggest fights. That still will probably be pay-per-view. But the benefit of this too is they can put on fights, attract an audience for some fights that will make some money that they would not get on DAZN, but also market then the pay-per-views, right? And so hopefully increase the pay-per-view numbers as well at the same time. And if that's the case, then it's a very effective model to have because you're increasing the viewership numbers, you're introducing fans in a cheap way on a platform that maybe people that have college basketball and watch Major League Baseball might already have. And so you can rope them in, remind them that we have boxing as well, and then also maybe rope a few in to go order the pay-per-views. I just don't think the subscription model on a monthly basis is really smart for DAZN in the United States. This could be very good. Now, I don't know how long it's going to last, and I don't know what's going to happen if the acquisition of Warner Brothers by Paramount goes through. I don't know how much Paramount's going to cave into what their relationship to Zuffa Boxing. I don't know how any of that's going to play out because my guess is this was been done by executives that are working on just under the assumption that maybe that deal with Warner Brothers never goes through, and they're just looking for content for their network, and it makes sense to them. But I think this could be great for boxing. It kind of maybe explains Top Rank's move to DAZN. Top Rank has a deal, 10 to 12 events. Doesn't sound like they're being paid a lot, but part of that might be that they decided it's worth it because that covers their kind of development shows that they can do for prospects and gives them guaranteed spots. And then almost like an HBO of the past, there might be more money available if they work with the other promoters, almost like DAZN having a budget or something instead of a guaranteed amount, and they have all these promoters in one place. So this could be, I'm still a little pessimistic because I don't think the reach of DAZN is that great, but this might be the best situation than, at least we're in a much better situation than I would imagine a few months ago for boxing, American boxing.
Do you think this could provide meaningful competition to Zuffa Boxing, considering that Zuffa Boxing is very likely going to get their bill pushed through?
Yeah, well, we'll have to see about the bill. I still think the odds are in favor of Zuffa Boxing, but I don't think it's a slam dunk because, I mean, people haven't noticed. We have emergency after emergency springing up in this country. It's very easy to see that it gets eclipsed by something else, and no one wants to deal with that bill while there's all these other issues to be dealt with.
All right. What about the Saudi connection to DAZN? Isn't that sort of counterproductive to Zuffa Boxing?
Well, that's the other question. But the Saudis, they are a strange breed of people because they have a partnership with Zuffa Boxing, but they also have 10% stake in DAZN. And also from all conversations with people, it doesn't sound like all the people in Saudi Arabia are constantly on the same page. Maybe there might be rivalries behind the scenes. I would think that the Saudis, because they have an investment in DAZN, would want to not should say they have investment in Zuffa Boxing, a much bigger investment. It could pay off a much higher. Potentially, you'd think they'd want to put all their eggs in that basket. But then the question is, they only have a 10% stake in DAZN. So DAZN, it's not like that's enough to dictate all the terms. On top of that, like I said, it's not 100% guaranteed that Warner Brothers and Paramount are going to merge. Now, the deal seems to be done. They beat out Netflix, but there might be some resistance going forward in Congress because it sounds like there's going to be an awful lot of foreign investment, which kind of violates the law there. Domestic broadcasters are supposed to be domestic. There's supposedly some national security issues there. There's also a little thing called a war going on in the Gulf, and you do not know how that's going to impact their ability to finance foreign investments, especially the United States, because Warner Brothers apparently needs tens of billions of dollars. They supposedly got the commitment from Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, but who knows what happens in the next few months, right? If there's a major attacks, I mean, there was one today on oil producing facilities in the East-West pipeline. But if those continue and they get much worse, I mean, there's a possibility that the Saudis maybe do not want to invest fully into Warner Bros. So the deal probably is going to go through, but it's not, I don't think, a guarantee. So if it doesn't go through, then you have this, it makes sense that TNT would put an effort into the boxing property. And if it takes off, well, then that does help the other promoters, and they do have a much bigger roster. They do have available many more of the top boxers right now. Zuffa is starting to sign them, and I think with Saudi money, as long as the money's still there, barring disaster with this war, they're going to go out and try to keep signing several key top fighters like they've been doing, and that'll put pressure on the other promoters. And they also have a great guaranteed $100 million a year Paramount deal with Zuffa Boxing, so it gives them some flexibility there. But if this deal can produce some results, increases pay-per-view buys, finds success with advertisers, then there's revenue for those other promoters, and there's a platform that their fighters are going to see that we are on a major platform that maybe boxing fans will tune into and see us. And so why go to Zuffa Boxing if they're not getting the audience, they're not putting on the big events, and if these guys can pay just as much, if not more, then I think it potentially does raise the possibility of not just being competition for Zuffa, but basically protecting the current stakeholders, giving a position where they're able to protect what they have. And who knows if they do pass the Ali Act in the future, if it does, this bill gets passed. I mean, it does set up a situation where maybe DAZN and all these promotions they're working with create a single entity UBO for all them together. And that serves as competition to the Zuffa boxing UBO. We could be living in a world where there's, instead of multiple sanctioning organizations, there's two massive UBOs that dominate the sport. I mean, and that's just one of many possibilities. It's too early to say what the outcome is going to be, but it does give I think the traditional boxing promoters have a better chance going forward if they have American broadcasting deals instead of just DAZN in the United States. And this gives them something for the American broadcasting deals. It doesn't mean it's a automatic fix, but it gives them some hope compared to what it was, just a few days ago, thinking about how bleak it was that everybody's going to be on DAZN.
There are folks out there that think that the Saudis might be ready to pull the plug on their boxing interests. Do you think that's possible? Even, let's say this war wasn't happening right now. Would you have considered that a possibility?
I mean, it's been discussion for a while, and I do think it's very likely, and all the reports are that they have pulled back tremendously. Before, the word was that they were paying 2 to 3x market value just to sign fighters. And now it is that last year it cut down to 30% above market value. Now it's like the Saudis and Riyadh season, they're paying for select few fighters, but they're not rounding up tons of them, right? And so you've seen some already pull back of the Saudis on their freewheeling spending. Turki Al-Sheikh is not putting on the massive events that he did before. He's still putting on some, but not the massive events before. And I think what happened, it seems kind of clear, is that they were getting into boxing, they were making a splash, but there was no money coming back, which is the whole purpose of their efforts with the PIF and everything, is to try to turn Saudi Arabia into a place that, makes money to find alternatives to oil. And so I don't know if someone reached out to the TKO or TKO reached out to the Saudis. I wouldn't be surprised either way. And they pitched them on the idea, hey, you could have a boxing promotion that actually makes money by following us, working with us. I think that's why they've teamed up with TKO for Zuffa Boxing, because they want to turn it into a venture, not just for the idea that it's going to be sports washing. I think they've moved past that with boxing, but the idea that they can actually make money on it. And so, no matter what, the money was starting to end anyways, was not being spent as freely. We just know that, but would they pull out completely? I'm not certain, but I do not on either front. One is, that they were not going to spend this forever, no matter what some people said, because Saudi Arabia, their PIF fund is not infinite. Is people pretend it's infinite, but it had a set amount of cash. The valuation was the valuation on paper, which no one even knows if it's a real valuation. The cash amount was finite, and they've spent a ton of that. And so eventually at some point they're going to say we have to rein in spending. And now on top of that, you throw in a war that potentially threatens their financing. I could see them tightening the belt even more. And boxing, splurging on big boxing events is probably not the best way to use your money. So I don't know for sure. I haven't seen anything that says for sure they're going to stop spending on boxing completely. I don't know about that. I think there likely will be some additional spending still, but I mean, it seems obvious for some time they were moving to a path towards spending a lot less on it than they had been.
Ryan Garcia, he and Arman Sarukian discussed UFC and boxing pay. Did anything in that conversation stand out to you?
Yes, it did. And what stood out to me, a couple things. One is the first part that really caught my eye was when Ryan Garcia said that Dana White has to pay the fighters more, that he has to pay the fighters more, as if it's a personal decision. The only thing that keeping fighter pay low is that Dana White is just personally not paying them. And it made me wonder, does Ryan Garcia think the only reason he makes more than MMA fighters is because Oscar De La Hoya is so nice that he decides to pay him more? That he made a personal decision to pay him more? No, the reason Ryan Garcia makes more is because it's a different model, because it's much more competitive in the world of boxing, because there's multiple promoters and multiple sanctioning organizations, and the competitive landscape is so much big. The net is cast so much wider for the fighters. The opportunities are so much more present, and so there's so much more money being paid to the fighters themselves. And that's why he makes more. It's a simple fact, as we had, James Quinn on, the guy that negotiated all this collective bargaining agreements for all the athletic associations. The number one thing that drives athlete pay is competition, and that's what boxing has. And so what's missing from MMA, it's not that Dana White isn't being nice. I mean, you could say that. He obviously could, with the money the UFC makes, pay the fighters more, but that's no, they didn't get into business to be nice guys. They're promoters. Promoters are notoriously not nice people. They make money off other people suffering brain damage. That is not the profession of choice for saints. So the reason the UFC does not have to pay more is because the system is set up that it's a closed shop. There's not a lot of competition. So that was one thing. The other thing was worth catching is what Armin said, is that fighters are getting paid more since the new Paramount deal, he said. Some of the lower guys are not, but all the champions who used to make $2 million, he said, are now making $4 million. Now, I don't know the exact amount, but we have heard reports, right, that Poatan and Topuria both have signed new deals, are getting paid, right? And my understanding from various sources that they're actually very lucrative deals that they are getting for MMA fighters. They're getting around 8 figures a fight, so 10 million, which is a tremendous amount for what UFC fighters have traditionally made. And so some fighters, it seems, are getting new deals. I don't think fans should be shocked by that either, because 10 million for two of your biggest stars in the company, perhaps the two biggest stars, right, should not be surprising considering how much the UFC makes. I mean, just as a comparison, if Ilia Topuria is the biggest star, Ryan Garcia is making often multiples even with that 10 million, and he is not the biggest star in boxing. He's a massive star, Garcia, in boxing, but he's not the biggest. There are other people at the heavyweight division, at Canelo, Crawford, since he retired, that are technically bigger than him now and make more than him. So it's, I think a lot of fans have the opinion, hold the view that UFC fighters make nothing. That they make, even the top guys are making maybe, 1 or 2 million a year. No, some of these guys, the top stars, the top champions, potentially are making, several million, up to the very, very, very top guys are making 10 million, but that is a fraction of what they find for the top guys in boxing. And there's a fast decline in that as well. If you're not a champion, that number goes down a lot. If the contenders are making a fraction of that, so there's a just like in boxing, there's a big decline versus the very top to the bottom. But it does show you that the UFC, I'm not 100% certain too, though, is that the UFC intentionally did this, because almost like a lot of what happened with women's basketball, a lot of the women refused to sign contracts, right? Until this new collective bargaining agreement was put in place. They let their contracts end because they wanted not to sign until the new deal was in place. They could get the higher amount. And my understanding is several fighters kind of held back on signing new contracts.
To access the bonus content of this episode, you must be a paid subscriber. To do that, go to heynottheface.substack.com and subscribe today.
Ow! Ow! Not the face! Ooh! Okay, the face!